Welcome to another edition of What People with Disabilities Teach Us. I'm your host, Mike Delaney, and today I think we have a very special program planned. I look forward to all of you viewing and listening, meeting our panel. These are some folks who've been very active in the Northern Kentucky area for the last 3 years plus, and there's a reason for that. There has been an unwelcome guest all across our United States, especially here in Northern Kentucky, up and down the I-75 corridor. We have come to know the unwelcome guest of heroin. A little over 3 years ago, a couple of our guests lost a son to this terrible scourge. Weeks ago, the Surgeon General came out with some shocking and just riveting statistics to talk about how bad this epidemic has become. It seems that Dr. Vivek Murthy, our U.S. Surgeon General, reported in his report Facing Addiction that we now have 1.5 times as many people suffering from substance disorders as we have suffering from all cancers combined, more than we have diabetics in this country. And yet only 1 in 10 are receiving treatment, even though the news coverage, the media coverage of this disease has been widespread. And even though where money has been spent, it's been proven that treatment saves $4 in every health care cost for every dollar invested, and $7 in criminal cost, but still we have millions that aren't getting treated. 21 million people suffering from substance disorders, including heroin. And if we invested in prevention programs, that would return up to $64 for every dollar invested. Still, the epidemic goes on. A group of people, through their suffering, a little over 3 years ago, lost a son, but vowed that there need to be a turnaround in this trend. And so we want to welcome today to share with us what they have learned, some of it the hard way, but nonetheless, they're here to bring us some hope. And we have on my left, Eric and Holly Specht, and on my right, we have Tony and Tina Garera. So, which of you two want to begin? Holly, Eric, which?
I guess I'll start. First of all, I want to thank you very much for having us. It takes a lot of us. Our voices are very important, and as a group, we can make a lot more noise and make a bigger difference. I'm Holly Specht. Like I said, I am Nicholas's mom. We lost our only son, Nicholas, on August the 8th, 2013, to an accidental heroin overdose in our home. He had just turned 30 years old. He was very much loved. He knew he was loved, and he was very important to us, and he remains to be very important to us. And we will continue to be Nicholas's voice like so many other sons and daughters. We will not give up. We will continue to speak for our son.
I'm Eric Specht, Nicholas's dad. Our family started NKYH Heroin in response to what happened with Nicholas's death from the overdose. And our goal is to provide help and resources to those who are suffering from the same thing that we suffered with as parents of someone going through the chaos of addiction. We like to provide resources to those not only going through that, but the families as well that are providing support to those loved ones. And that's our mission.
Thank you. Tony, Tina, you want to take a turn?
All right. I'm Tina Garera, and I believe we became associated with the Specht family in Northern Kentucky about 3 years ago. We had been struggling through our son's addiction for about 10 years when we finally decided to seek help. We met originally at a forum that they were set up, and from there, about a year ago, a little over a year, my husband and I started facilitating a family support group called PAL, and the connection with Northern Kentucky Hates Heroin and the Specht family has been invaluable for resources, support, and just friendship, kindred spirit of sort. They, in fact, have lost their son, but we continue to fight for our son and his addiction, and for the families that have their loved ones that are suffering with addiction.
Tina brought up one word which is very important, which is the resource. Northern Kentucky Hates Heroin is an important resource for a lot of ways that help both us and the families that we deal with on a daily basis. They have resources through the book that they put out that tells many things we need to get people help, but also themselves. They're a great resource to get people the help they need, both the families that have lost somebody and all of us that still are trying to keep ours alive.
Thank you all. So, you have a relationship, which is a neat thing. You found each other, and you've found a lot of people. I've heard some of the numbers, Holly, that you've referenced in recent get-togethers. It was only 700 to 1,000 people.
Yes. And it ended up being an event that just happened to fall into our lap, which we're very proud of, that there's folks out there who trust us enough to come to us and to help support our cause, to help support our organization, because in return they know that through their efforts and our efforts, we're touching many, many numbers. It's the domino effect.
And there was another event this summer, because I started out to go there, but it was such an overflow event out Route 17, that they had a parking away from the event, and I had been up for nearly 24 hours, and I just turned around and went back. But it was my good intention to be on hand. But that was so packed, so crowded, that you were turning people down the road to park and shuttling them by bus.
Mike's referring to our 5K that we have every year, our annual 5K. It's a great way for the community to come out and support the cause. I have found that we have a fairly high percentage of people that are walkers in our race, and it's because we think that the problem resonates, and what we're doing resonates with so many people. The problem is so widespread. But again, it's a 5K. It's out at Simon Kenton every year in June, and it's very successful. We hit about a little bit less than 1,600 people this year, and it's by far our most prevalent moneymaker, and all those funds that we have are put toward again, we're turning it back into the community and trying to help support others that are fighting the same fight that we are.
And it wasn't even that event, it was the memorial, the candlelight vigil that I went to, that was an overflow crowd. So you've alluded to yet another. And you keep having these gatherings of numerous people. And I find that so significant. I want to share with you just something recently written in this month's issue by Mary Gilberti, who is president and director of NAMI, I guess just director. This month's issue, she talked about becoming more engaged in mental health kinds of things. And Mary wrote, lately we at NAMI have been talking about engagement. Just as engaged couples pledge to walk this journey of life together, an important part of engagement in the mental health community involves a commitment between supporters, family, providers, community, etc. And then she goes on, and I emphasize this, I've highlighted this part. According to the NAMI report, engagement is the strengths-based process through which individuals with mental health conditions form a healing connection with people that support their recovery and wellness with the context of family, culture, and community. you've given a description of becoming engaged. I don't know if Tony got down on one knee and offered you a ring, Holly, or but in a very real way, I want to talk about also in this program disengagement. We're talking about people who often suffer from social isolation. Am I correct, or am I making an assumption?
No,
No.
you're correct. That's part of the big problem with addiction, where the people are isolating themselves from their past life, meaning their families, meaning their good friends. Unfortunately, they're in the wrong crowd, and they stay in the wrong crowd. The isolation is important because when they're isolated and all they can think about is the drugs, that's their only friend. And it, of course, is a disease. It's not something that they think they can just stop like this. It's that isolation. They feel that they, that's what they can go to.
Well said, Tony. It's the only friend they can go to. I'm going to make an observation, and Mary Gilberti also referenced mental health frequently. The Surgeon General mentioned it in his report. People said, why is this blossoming? Why has this grown? When we were young, or when I was young, as stereotypical as it may be, heroin was something that happened in Harlem. I remember that evangelical book, The Cross and the Switchblade. Pat Boone endorsed it, and Christians everywhere were reading about, going into the hardest urban core and rescuing people who were at the lowest socioeconomic level and so forth. But we're talking about the best drugs being available in some of the best communities now. And people wonder why, and the Surgeon General mentioned of drug availability, prescription is for painkillers being a precipitating kind of condition. But I want to throw out another possibility, and you don't have to buy into it if it doesn't resonate. A lot of folks who become addicted to drugs have various kinds of mental health issues. ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder, depression, sometimes other kinds of intellectual problems. On the autism spectrum, PTSD, the list goes on and on.
Well, we often talk about that. We don't know whether the addiction started first or the depression, and it really doesn't matter, but it seems like they do suffer with both.
And I think to Tony's point earlier, these are people who already struggle for friends, with or without the addiction.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Once they get into the drugs and become more involved with the drugs, the friendships dissolve. The good friendships dissolve.
Okay.
And are replaced more by, as Tony mentioned before, by those drug relationships.
Yeah.
Also relating to the mental health and the depression and the, I agree that I think that there's all kinds of trauma. We have physical trauma that we all hear about, the sports injuries or whatever, the work-related injuries that people suffer with, and they become addicted to pain medication. There's all kinds of trauma. There's emotional trauma. And I think that there is quite a bit, if we look at it this way, I think that there are a lot of people that are really all they're doing with addiction in so many ways is they are just distracting themselves from whatever that baggage is that they're carrying with them. They're just trying to dull the pain and distract themselves from it. And I think that explains an awful lot of different behavior with regard to addiction.
As far as, let's backtrack a little bit, hanging with the right crowd, or hanging with the wrong crowd. I'd say that Nicholas was pretty much just your average typical kid, hung with what I thought and we thought were the good kids, the good families. But I think eventually over time, when things started going wrong in Nicholas's world and his heart and his head, I think one thing that he truly experienced a lot of was guilt. And I think if you look at yourself, you see yourself differently than maybe your friends or your loved ones see you. So I think that has a lot to do with who you end up hanging around with. You may think that you are not accepted by this crowd or that crowd, and I believe a lot of that is in your mind. I just think guilt plays such a huge part of it.
But let me ask you about that, Holly.
Sure.
Have you heard of borderline personality disorder and folks who come across as having it all together when they're a real basket case behind the scenes, or being depressed about not being able to measure up, or anxious because of the expectations families lay on us and we think our peers are putting on us? Those are all mental health issues that cause us to put on a facade when inside we're breaking up. And I know as a minister, oh my, people come into church, and I've heard my colleague in our last recording, Susan Diamond from Florence Christian Church, she said, people come and everything's just fine. It's expected to be. Come and be positive at church. We don't, when we talk about reaching out and growing the church, we know that, and get out there and get all the depressed people. Make sure they're here. Or the schizophrenics, put all the schizos right there in the front row.
The very place where you should feel the most comfortable and the most safe to be able to share what you're going through and your journey. If you can't share with your church family
And get support from
and
them.
get support from your own church family,
Where are you going to get it?
well, yeah, exactly. And to go there with a smiley face and everything's okay. How are we helping our families? We're not helping our families by doing that.
Well, I didn't mean to pick on churches just
Oh, no,
because
no.
we have those kinds of social pressures everywhere. It's
Everywhere.
in school and even at home in our families.
Absolutely. Growing up, well, Eric, obviously you can tell the story better about your father and alcoholism and feeling like that you were the only family.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's true of just about everyone who is has grown up with someone in the family suffering from addiction. That my father was an alcoholic, and there was certainly the stigma, and we talked a lot about the stigma, and maybe we should talk a little bit more about the stigma. But the stigma of alcohol addiction and not wanting to talk about it, to being embarrassed about it, being ashamed of it, and not discussing it with anyone, not discussing it even within the family, or if you do, it's certainly in the context of it's a choice on the part of the alcoholic in this case, that they're almost willingly not getting help. They're almost willingly interfering with all the dynamics and whatever kind of support that's offered to them, and it's rejected. So it's even at the family level, much less anyone outside the family. It's very hard to understand what that means and what it means to someone who's suffering from that. And as far as the family goes and the stigma goes, that is just exactly the opposite of what is needed, obviously. One thing that we decided when we found out that Nicholas was addicted, and certainly after his death, that we were going to talk about the stigma. We were going to come out and let everyone know that they are not the only ones going through the same thing that we went through. And there's strength in that. There's strength in being able to talk about the stigma, because it's a stigma that gets in the way of everything. It's a stigma that allows a judge to decide or make it easy for a judge to decide that rehabilitation is second to incarceration. Incarcerate first and don't even think about rehabilitation. It's the stigma that allows a first responder to feel like it's okay not to carry Narcan or naloxone. Because, we were just here last week and they're doing it, it's their choice, they're doing it to themselves. It's the stigma that gets in the way of this, of a father helping his son. It's the judgment that the father may bring against his own son. That it gets in the way of everything, and stigma is something that we can all do something about.
And it's a stigma that gets in the way of the honesty that an addict needs to confess. I've got a problem, I need help, but the stigma gets in the way of admitting the problem.
Yes.
And getting the help that is needed.
Absolutely.
And consequently, the Surgeon General is right. 1 in 10 people are getting the help they need right now. And this epidemic's been growing and been out there for years now. With people like you all courageously doing everything you can and having success, making relationships, reaching out and finding one another in ways. In fact, I don't even think people realize that our whole society has a problem with engagement.
Indeed.
A fellow by the name of Robert Putnam wrote this book. It came out in 2000, but I think it's still relevant. And he chronicled in the second half of the 20th century how everything has been in decline socially in the United States. And he's got a whole list, everything, from family meals to church attendance and participating in the political process. Everybody was all caught up in this recent presidential election, but voter turnout was the lowest it's been in 20 years, and that's referencing the 1996 presidential campaign, which was a momentary spike. Prior to that, presidential voter turnout had been down for 40 years, on the decline. Not only that, participation in professional and associational kinds of memberships, PTAs, everything across the people playing board games and playing cards. It's estimated in 20 years there'll no longer be playing cards produced because nobody plays cards that much anymore. Greeting cards, yes, we send them electronically and digitally, but not even too much of that anymore. I've received, I don't know about you all this Christmas season, I've received 1 greeting card, or was it 2 so far? Used to get 60. People no longer choose to have contact with one another, and we've got a problem as a people because that contributes to all kinds of problems across the board, not just drug addiction, crime, suicide is up. I've got a reference over there. My graduating class and our producer Pam's graduating class in 1971, half as many of our parents committed suicide as from our generation. We were born in 1953, but our children were committing suicide at a rate of 3 and 4 times what we did. And that is just one part of the malaise of mental health. It's rare, fortunately, but when you go through the list of other kinds of things, people might say, we didn't have all this depression and anxiety and all these things back then. Yes, we did.
Yeah, sure we did.
We did, and folks were at the neighborhood bar drowning them with alcohol.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We just didn't have the names to call them.
That they didn't talk about it in public like you were saying.
Yeah.
The common thread of solution, if you will, the common, what am I trying to say, the remedy for this, I don't know, that it's a simple thing, but again, it's relationships. And I think what Tony and Tina are doing with the parents with addicted loved ones it's a remarkable chapter they have, and it's very successful, and very many people attend that. There's so many people that are going through, again, the same thing that we did with their families, and they don't know where to turn or what to do. And the first thing you need to do is get help for yourself, and you understand what that means. And I think what you all are doing is terrific. It speaks to that so much, you know.
Well, the one point about the people that come to the group, and we're all families that have had people that are either currently in addiction or some unfortunately have lost it. When we get people coming in, what I like to see is the change in their lives. We've got some that have come in and they're nothing but angry, mad the whole time, but then throughout the weeks, months, sometimes more than a year we've been doing this, and these people will change themselves. And then the neat thing, even though I want to see those people change, is when we see a change in their loved one because they've seen it in their parent or grandparent or whatever loved one it would be. And that's what it's all about. I mean, we would love if we didn't have any addiction issues, but we know that's not going to happen. But to be able to have us change, and we wish that this would have been around a lot longer. We wish we would have known about it years ago, but the neat thing is we can help others the same way that we didn't have help then, and they're helping us too. Every day we're in a meeting, it helps us.
I think we're not making excuses. We're still saying people have to be accountable, and you know, if you play, you may pay. I mean, we would still tell our loved ones, you do risky behavior, there will be a price, consequences, but also want people to be able to reach out when they need help and find, like, kindred spirits. Was that you, Holly, that mentioned kindred spirits?
That was Tina.
Okay. And I haven't been a perfect parent. I've got 3 daughters that remind me of that. And I've visited with you all, and you have indicated that your every moment wasn't father and mother knows best.
No.
But Tina, you and Holly mentioned visiting the detention center recently.
Mhm. Yes, we were invited to the Kenton County Detention Center. We sat and spoke, I believe, in front of 30 women. And quite honestly, I was very, very nervous about even entering the detention center, just because of memories of Nicholas. It ended up being an absolutely incredible experience. I think Tina and I tag teamed very well together because the ladies were able to see a mother who has lost her son, and then a mother who continues to fight for her son. I felt like, and I think I'm speaking for Tina on this, I felt like that we were a voice as mothers. We were able to stand in front of these women and let them know they are not on this journey alone. We are here. We care about them. We're out here fighting for them. What they have to say and what they feel is important. They do matter. And that their parents are just as involved, even if they're not willing to admit that, or the loved ones are just as involved and just as sick as those suffering from the disease. And I think we saw some light bulbs go off. Maybe some of those ladies had never heard anyone say that. Some of them expressed that they hear, it's your problem, you deal with it. Well, I believe the 4 of us sitting here realizes that's not true at all. That's not the case. It's definitely a family disease. And I think it was a really good experience. How did you feel about it?
Absolutely. I went wondering who we would be able to help and came out knowing it was me that got a blessing. Like Holly said, every one of those girls related, and I do think they heard a different perspective. They only maybe in the past have heard their parents screaming and yelling, which we all do out of fear or upset, and to hear 2 parents talk about understanding and that we can understand that we are sick too and that we need help. And I encouraged every one of them when they came out or come out of the detention center to seek help for themselves, but to also encourage their families. They're going to tell them that you're the one that's sick, you're the one that needs help, but it isn't. It's all of us. And I think when Tony and I realized that we weren't, we weren't getting better, and we started seeking people that were on the same journey, it wasn't until then that we realized, hey, it's okay to talk about these horrific things that are happening that we thought we were the only ones that were experiencing. So it's done a lot, and every time we speak, doesn't matter when that door opens and you go in and talk to somebody, you're going to reach them somehow. You just know you'll reach one, and it seems like we always do, which is a blessing.
And it's not making excuses, it is seeking understanding. And that's assuming responsibility. That's not shirking responsibility to try and help people understand. So when you all open up about this, we talk about the relationship sometimes between mental health and availability of drugs and the possibilities. Nobody's looking for a way out, or don't blame us, no, but rather we are seeking, where does the problem lie? If it's within us, and without a doubt, part does. It's so we'll have a handle on it and know what to do. It's part of the solution.
Well, I think it goes to say too that there's a lot of blame to go around, and believe me, as parents, I think we blame ourselves too, and the loved ones, they're blaming themselves. So there's certainly enough blame to go around.
Yeah, and we've got we're good at blame and punish. The solution's to punish.
Yes.
I'm not so sure if somebody isn't thinking clearly that ever helped me. To yell at me, to hit me. That didn't help me think more clearly. It really, I was already pretty confused. Now, I may have shut up, but I just swallowed my confusion and looked for other ways to bathe it in some kind of, take away the pain.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of blame to go around. I think that parents need to just be aware of what it's like is if you have a loved one that's going through addiction, it's so easy to judge that person. It's just really, you need to look within yourself and try to understand what it is that they're going through. It sounds so simplistic and everything, but it's really at the heart of it. You cannot. I guess the one thing that always went through my mind, I was always confused with the enabling versus support, and I'm kind of becoming more, as you stated before. I'm not too crazy about the word enabling anymore, but classically, what that means is to ignorantly supply, make it easy for your loved one to continue with their addiction. And I'm not too crazy about that definition, but there is definitely it is a family disease, and it is a systemic kind of, even no matter how small the system is, a systemic problem. And you simply need to get help. You need to look at yourself first, and you need to go out and get that support at PAL or at Al-Anon or wherever it lies within relationships. It lies within forming new relationships. and especially a relationship with yourself, to question yourself as to what it is that is allowing this to happen in your family with your loved one. And have a clear understanding of that, because more than any other influence out there for that addicted person, it's going to be you as a parent that has more of an impact over their life. No matter what you think as that parent, if you don't believe that, it's true. And so you need to be clear about all of that before you push things too far. You don't want to ever close the door, and that's where that's where the line comes between support and enabling. Surely you don't want to give them money or enable like the classical sense, but at the same time you always want to have that support and never want to close the door. Never close off that relationship. Never let the stigma never let that stigma get in the way. So that's my speech.
No, you're exactly right. And I think in our group, we preach a lot about healthy helping. I don't like the word enabling, because I don't know of a parent that is involved with their loved one, their child, whatever, that doesn't want to help. But there are ways through education to learn how to do healthy helping.
That's true. The stigma word that Eric has brought up so many times is one of the words that I hate and I love, which means I hate the word that and shame, but I love to bring it up because that's the thing that when we years ago finally came out to our own family and said, we have an issue, this is what it is. They had a clue. They might have known actually more than we did, but until you get past the stigma and the shame of saying, hey, we've got an addicted person in our family, you're not going to get any better. I mean, not everybody has to be on TV, but you just need to get over it. It's tough. We've got people that we've been dealing with for years and still can't tell their own family. But the other problem is we've got people that have been out for years, and some of those people still aren't accepted by their churches. While we're lucky, our church is very supportive. I know your church is very supportive, but it's some churches, some businesses, some people are ostracized where they work, while some people are brought in. It all depends on the situation, but as situation, the stigma, nothing's going to get better if people don't talk about it. Just like anything else that's changed in the past. People used to look at people that were cancer, and, oh, I didn't want to be near them, but now that's different. Even doctors. We've got friends that are doctors in this profession and that are dealing with addiction, and they're treated differently than a regular medical doctor or a cancer doctor. Mm-hmm. So that's.
I recently posted on our Facebook page, and I know he doesn't mind, he wants the word to get out, about an attorney here in Kentucky who overdosed, and his father now writes a blog, and he's from northern Kentucky, though he's now residing and working in the Lexington area. But here we're talking about an attorney and a veteran at that, who had a problem with depression and overdosed this summer. So we're talking about reputable people, professional people, not the bottom of the social and economic rung necessarily, although it permeates all levels.
Like Tina has a saying that we heard or came up with years ago that it's from park bench to park place. We've got people in that we deal with. They're from very low economic. We've got millionaires that we deal with, and there's no one that's not affected.
I was searching through my papers here. That's what I was doing. I wanted to commend all of you for the relationships that you have born out of this tragedy and crisis. The partnerships that are listed on your website, Northern Kentucky Hates Heroin. that maybe we can just wing it, and you can name some of them. I have the list here somewhere, but you've connected with Transitions, Charlotte Wethington. We're in the building of the Wagners. Give me some more names of folks. I mean,
NKU, we've got a strong relationship with NKU.
St. Elizabeth
St. Elizabeth.
Medical Center, hospital.
I've often kind of laughed and looked up to heaven before and has said to our son Nicholas, I've said, Nicholas, I can't believe how many cops your mom's hanging out with. I mean, how many police officers we've met, firemen, political folks, sports figures. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on. It just keeps coming and coming and coming. And it's just, and there's times that it's very overwhelming. So we just have to sit back sometimes and breathe and hope that we have folks that'll help us, because we are a very small organization. I often say that NKY Heroin on the day-to-day runs by 2.5 people, and sometimes just 2. But we're small, our family, but our circle of friends,
Your network.
our network is humongous.
And we've been hard on churches maybe, but your church, First Christian Church in Fort Thomas, has a sign on the front lawn.
Yes.
Northern Kentucky
Yes.
hates heroin.
Yes, we actually, the one event that really touched us, we pulled up and it said home of NKY Hates Heroin. And we've been at that church for 5 generations, and we're just so blessed to have their support.
And
continue, and that is also growing. On the list of folks that call us, I just had a minister notify me from another church. We've spoken churches. It's so huge, I dare not even say exact names out of fear of forgetting someone, but you can't do it alone.
Your front yard has a Northern Kentucky hates
Yes, it
heroin
does.
sign. Can you imagine a decade ago somebody putting a sign in their front yard about heroin? I mean,
Mike, I
And
can't
they're all
imagine.
over northern Kentucky.
I can't imagine it 3.5 years.
yes, a half a block from my house, a lady has a banner out too.
Yeah.
Tina, or Tony, I mean, I'm sure you can share similar kinds of contacts.
Lots of contacts. The one key, though, with Northern Kentucky Hates Heroin that I think they need to elaborate on is what they do. As a charity, you heard about the functions that they're doing to make money, but it all goes out. The resource books are one of the best things. They're on their 3rd edition. You've printed probably tens of thousands of those.
Like over 21,000.
I have one at home, yeah.
But they're fantastic. We actually were using it last night at our group with some people in need. But the resource book is fantastic. But what you all do to help people get into rehab, and explain just a little bit about how it goes out, because it's very important that people understand that.
Well, we do a lot of work with Charlotte Wethington, who has become a very close friend of ours, who lost her son.
Lost her son.
Lost her son 14 years ago, Casey. And we work side by side. We do a lot of Casey's Law work. That is somewhat of a lonely thing to do. Is you sit in your room, you sit on your couch, you sit in your computer room with a piece of paper, and you're talking to someone on the other end of the phone, a parent typically, that feels they have lost everything. Their money, their relationship, maybe their marriage, and for fear they're going to lose their child. Yeah. And you have to try to get this person to compose himself, to maybe hear and be willing to hear some of your ideas and suggestions. We have to be very careful. We're not psychologists, we're not counselors. We just try to follow by the letter of the law for Casey's Law to help this person get their loved one into rehab. Because as Charlotte often said, when I hear parents say to me, well, I don't know if my son or daughter has hit rock bottom, that pains us deeply. Yes. Because rock bottom is a casket in a lot of cases. So we help folks get Casey's Law. For folks who cannot afford it, we help work with counselors and doctors to help pay for the evaluations to get into Casey's Law. There's
Casey's Law for our audience, just briefly.
Casey's Law, oh goodness, Casey's Law is a law that will help. You do not have to be related. It could be, let's say that my friend Tony has a problem with alcohol and I fear that he is a danger to himself. I can go to the court and petition to have Tony brought to the court to go into rehab. He will not have a court record, and part of the process is, well, it's all about saving his life, to get him help, the help that he deserves and the help that he needs. So I'm working with the judge, I'm working with the clerk, I'm working with the family, and we're all working together to help save Tony's life.
And prior to Casey's Law, there was often a great deal of resistance
Absolutely.
and barriers to getting a person help.
Absolutely, and
No, you didn't have leverage as a friend or a parent to be able
Correct.
to do anything. This person's usually an adult, and you
Yes.
have no legal recourse before.
correct.
And now there's a lever to be
Right,
able
right.
to
And,
help.
and the judge will help us to help that person get help into rehab. And if they do not follow through the judge's orders, they will be put in jail. And hopefully while they're in jail, in the meantime, the family will be out looking, trying to find a rehab, because as the petitioner, it's our responsibility to find rehab for that person. And I do want to clarify one thing that paralyzes the process for loved ones is when they see in the black and white that you are financially responsible for the rehab. That terrifies people, because a lot of folks at this point are financially broken. And let me tell you, we can find help for your loved one. We can find where you do not have to pay to have rehab. Maybe another state and maybe across the country. But we work and try to help families to be able to get help for their loved ones.
And the Surgeon General made it clear in that report a couple of weeks ago about the new parity law, that there is now a parity law with insurance companies who might have previously denied coverage, that the same coverage that is provided for other illnesses must be provided for recovery. And that's what the parity law
And
makes
that
available.
can save lives.
Yeah.
That will help save lives.
So if people think I don't have the insurance, or,
Yes.
my insurance won't cover it, is what I'm.
And I do want to clarify that with the Casey's Law, you can do that more than once. You can do it as many times as it takes, because it can take 6 to 7 to 8 times in rehab sometimes. I believe that's the average. Seven times in a rehab.
Well, in an era, and we've all seen it, where even in youth sports, participation is down compared to the 1970s and 80s. Fewer people participating, young people in sports, fitness centers. It's more older people that are going to stay in shape and so forth. But we've already mentioned churches and other kinds of volunteer organizations, people getting involved. What a contrast, what a wonderful contrast to hear that your numbers are growing. I'm sorry, it's for the reason that you have to get out, but it's meaningful work. And people are enjoying the engagement of being in touch with one another. And so I, for one, am very thankful for that. Tony?
Well, you got a good point. With our group, we love that our numbers are big because we help people, but we hate that our numbers have to be big. But we also love these people, but we wish we would never had to meet them like that. I mean, we have hundreds of people we've met in the last few years when we've been advocating and volunteering and different things, but until, a whole different group of friends, or as Tina calls it, not our DNA family, it's our other family. I mean, it's
non-DNA family.
and that has helped us, and of course, in the end, will help our loved ones. But, the community as a whole needs to, you know, embrace what we're doing, what they're doing especially, and help. And not, I mean, there's government officials, some are fantastic, and some are just awful.
And something else that I want to elaborate on with what Holly brought up, but I think we were talking about this the other day. Like she said, in no way are we professionals, but it's not easy in any way. Every phone call that we get, it's reliving in some ways what we went through. When Tony and I knew that we wanted to reach back out and give back to the community with support, I never want a family to suffer the way we did in silence. And every phone call that we get, just like Holly said, these moms, and it is mostly the moms when they call, that are just beyond consoling. And I think what makes it work is that we've been there. You know, we're still there, a lot of us. And when you can connect on that level, it makes a difference. And I tell whoever I'm talking to, step out of your comfort zone. I know as a parent you think you can fix it. You can love them well. You can't. And you need other people that are on the same journey, that know what you mean. And I use this analogy a lot, that we sleep with our purses, or you know, we get it. We know what you're going through. There's nothing that you can tell us that your loved one has done that is going to shock us. It's not going to shock us. So step out of your comfort zone and you seek help. And in that, you'll find relationships and connections that I promise you will help. It will help you.
We haven't given you, Tina and Tony, a chance to make mention of PAL. You want to take a moment and do so, and if folks need to get in touch with you, tell them how.
Okay.
Well, PAL stands for Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. It's a group that was started 10 years ago in Phoenix, Arizona by a man named Mike Specht. He's a licensed clinical social worker who was treating the addicted people, but saw a big disconnect when it came to the families, that they weren't getting any help. And he started back then, and it's a parent-led group. They're started in Arizona. Now we think it's in 17 states, 51 meetings. There's actually 4 in the area in northern Kentucky, and I think 7 all in Kentucky. The easiest way to find out about a meeting is palgroup.org. You can go to location. They're all over the country. The neatest thing about PAL, and one of the logos, is you're not alone, because that's the truth. You're not alone, whether it be you're a parent or a friend, family member. It's open to anybody. You know, our meetings are, we have one meeting every week, another one twice a month in a different location. They're important because people need help. You need that community, as they've been talking about, the relationships, and to know that you're not alone and you need help. The PAL meetings are a faith-based thing. We always open in prayer. We make sure that everybody is comfortable, knows what you are. If you want to speak during the meeting, great. If you don't, that's fine. We have an educational component. We talked about enabling and healthy helping one week. We talked about delayed emotional growth, which is important because our kids might be 30 years old, but we see him as 15 because that's when he started taking the drugs. Lots of different topics. And then we also have share time, which you talk about that. That's one of the most important parts.
Yeah, I think the share time is the most important thing, because that's when you get the opportunity to hear other families and what they're going through at the moment. And even though you may not be in that particular part of your journey, you've either been there or you will be. So you're learning, and just by listening to everybody else as we go around the room, and we find out the drug of choice, and we find out what's happening that particular week with them. It's just unbelievable. I can remember thinking, how in the world is going to a group going to help me help my loved one? And we laugh a lot of times with Holly, and I think we were talking about the Northern Kentucky Hates Heroin signs, and our son in particular, he kind of got to where, are you all hanging out with the Northern Kentucky Hates Heroin people again? And we heard that one of the girls from the detention center, she made a comment about, when I see that Northern Kentucky Hates Heroin sign, it made me not use one day. So if it made her use not one day, that's progress, and we count all of that as progress. So you do find joy in your journey, even in the worst of times.
Well said. And Tony, you gave me the inspiration I needed. I was this close to telling Pam, our producer, the title for today's program, No Longer Alone. So I thank you for giving me the courage to go follow through with that. We have a title.
There we go.
Anything you want to say about Northern Kentucky Hates Heroin by way of giving people information to contact you? Or
We have a website. If you have any questions or if you have a need, if you'd like to contact us in any way. And there's a lot of good information on our website about what we do and lots of questions that we answer there. We just, it's a great resource in and of itself, so feel free to contact us that way if you have any way that we can help you.
And we also always say and share that if we do not know the answer, we will find someone that knows the answer for you, because there's so many different questions, so many folks that are out there. And I just have to say, the one thought that was going through my mind is that for those suffering from addiction and their families, I believe with all my heart, absolutely, silence kills. It absolutely will destroy a family and those that are suffering from this disease. I've said before to different people when I've spoke, NKY hates heroin. We're going to be in your face. We're going to be in your face.
Thank you. Those words and encouraging our viewers to not be silent on this subject any longer. Thank you for I know you don't want to hear it called courage. It is uncommon. You've done what people have found is the only solace when they encounter suffering and tragedy, and that is to reach out to others and help them with their burdens. Pam Mullins, the producer, and I, Mike Delaney, is your host. We have struggled in our families with health. I lost my mother 2 months ago. Many thanks to all the people who reached out to us, and that was a challenge to maintain our schedule. Pam has likewise had illnesses within her family, and the once a month program schedule that we aspired to didn't happen. This is, I think, our 6th program in 2016, so it was every other month. And I'm getting ready to return to complete a certificate, I hope, that I started all the way back in 2010 to be certified as a chaplain starting next month in January at Veterans Hospital and Medical Center in Cincinnati. So we're not sure how frequently we'll be able to broadcast in the coming year, but stay tuned. We hope to resume at some point, and we thank all of you for being faithful and devoted followers.